our sister-in-law Michelle came over that day, and we had different people who came over and or at different times encouraged us through this process. But there was something different about just even the hugs Michelle gave and the words that she said and the tears that she shed. There was something different because she had experienced that depth of sorrow. And there's something, I think, that happens to each one of us whenever we go through a hard time. And God ends up turning that around and later on uses that so that we can relate to another person in their depths of sorrow. And so God really taught me a lesson just to be sensitive, because God really, during that period, probably the person that God used the most was Michelle. It wasn't any particular word she said or whatever. It was just her presence there and her empathy that she had because she had gone through a similar type thing.
That's good. That's good. The story didn't end there, obviously. You mentioned y'all have 3 children. Tell us a little bit about them so that I don't have to.
We have bragging rights, but we'll leave it to y'all.
Right.
Well, Taylor is our oldest, and
how did y'all come about with her name?
with all 3 of the children's names, we wanted their names to have some type of legacy behind them. And so the Hudson and Maria Taylor, who were missionaries to China, had really impacted, some of their writings had really impacted both Kelly and I. And so we felt like in order to have that legacy behind even what we call her, we wanted to name her Taylor, and then Renee, after Kelly's middle name is Renee, and also my sister's middle name, Renee. So we wanted their names to have significance in our minds. The same was with our second, Riley Carmichael. We named her after the middle name after Amy Carmichael, who was a missionary to India and helped a lot of young girls, and so we did that with Riley. And then Braden Samuel, Samuel being after you, and the Braden part.
And we need to pray for that.
He needs more prayer than anybody.
And the Braden part means to be brave, and we just really felt like that God was raising up, hopefully, a brave young man, and we felt like that was symbolic of who we desire for him to become.
Having 3 small children, we'll talk about the children and maybe next week, but on you guys, 3 children that age, it's got to be tough. We never got to that place where we had 3 preschoolers because we only had two children, but 3 children at one time, preschool. What has the Lord done in you guys? I know a lot of this is still new right now, but what's He done in you having 3? What's He teaching you? What's going on? Is it just teaching you how to figure out sleep, or or what is it? So tell me a little bit about that in your relationship, how all of this is working.
Yeah, you joke about sleep, but sleep is a huge, especially when you're in the middle of not getting a whole bunch of sleep, for years on end. And I do think, for me, I always tell people when I got married, probably the greatest lesson I've learned in the last 10 years of marriage is how selfish I really am. And God uses our spouse to refine us in so many different ways and shows the depravity of our own heart. And then you have children and you just multiply that, because your time is not your own. You have responsibilities of guiding these little ones, and especially the littler they are, the more dependent they are, completely dependent upon you. And so from time factors to trying to emulate what kind of man or woman we hope they grow up to be, living the lives we're supposed to be. There's a myriad of lessons that I think, we could probably spend the whole next show talking about, that we've learned from this and that we're continuing to learn, and that we failed at times. But I just think it is something that that probably, for me, at least in my 35 years of existence on earth, there's nothing that has helped to continue to refine me more than having these three little ones, in a lot of ways. And sleep is a huge part of that, because you have to be very intentional about how you live your life, or else you won't get much sleep at all. And so, and when you're, well, at least for us, when we don't sleep, that's when we tend to react out of the flesh and live our lives being more lazy rather than being consistent, and all the different other facets of what it takes to be, the parents that God's called you to be.
As we close, and we're going to talk next week, and if you know someone who has children, small children, or raising children right now, next week's broadcast is going to be talking specifically about that, and we're going to get into that in some great detail. But as we close, with either one of you, is there one thing that you would say is on your heart that in developing your relationship with one another that you would want to leave with people?
I think it's important to that you guys, that as a couple, that you connect on a regular basis, and that you obviously there's a quote that I use for leadership by Dave Fleming that says that calling is as much about becoming someone as it is discovering something to do. The action is powered by the source, not the other way around. And I think that can apply to marriage too, that our calling to marriage is as much about becoming who God wants us to be as it is about following all these different principles of what makes a good marriage. And I think as long as I'm in the place and Kelly's in the place where we're continuing to follow who God wants us to be, and we have that joint vision of wanting to follow who God wants us to be individually, then all the other things fall into place. If I'm concentrating on my part about loving my wife as Christ loved the church, then it makes it so much easier for Kelly to be the wife that God has called her to be. And if she's concentrating on her part, vice versa. And so I think as we become the people that God wants us to be individually, and have that corporate goal of doing that together, then God will use that marriage and hopefully refine us and change us in the process.
So grow in your relationship with the Lord, become what He wants you to be, and just let Him do in you what He wants to do in you, and the rest will take place. Thank you so much for being a part of this broadcast, and may God bless you and your family in this week.